Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone. What if the reason you hold back isn't fear, but shame quietly deciding for you? Most of the ways shame shapes our lives don't arrive as dramatic moments. They slip in quietly, disguised as common sense, humility, or realism. It sounds like the voice that says, "That's just how I am," or "I shouldn't expect more," or "Other people can do that, but not me." And because it doesn't shout, we rarely question it. We assume it's truth. We assume it's wisdom. We assume it's self-awareness. But often it's shame wearing a very convincing mask. Over time, shame becomes invisible precisely because it feels familiar. It blends into your inner dialogue until you no longer recognize it as something learned. It feels like personality. It feels like character. It feels like maturity. You tell yourself you're being realistic when you lower your dreams. You call it being strong when you swallow your needs. You label it independence when you stop asking for help. And slowly, without realizing it, your world begins to shrink, not because you lack ability, but because shame has been quietly setting the limits. What makes this so powerful is that shame doesn't usually say, "You are bad." It's far more subtle. It says, "Don't risk that," or "Stay quiet or you'll look foolish." It convinces you that staying small is safer than being seen. And because safety feels good in the short term, we listen. We don't notice that each time we silence ourselves, something vital inside us grows a little quieter too. Many people carry this invisible weight for years without a name for it. They feel tired, disconnected, or restless, but they can't explain why. On the surface, life might look fine. They're functioning, they're responsible, they're doing what's expected. But underneath, there's a constant sense of holding back, of living half a step away from their own life. Shame thrives in this space because it keeps you busy managing appearances instead of listening to your truth. The hardest part is that shame often feels like protection. It tells you it's preventing embarrassment, rejection, or failure. It warns you not to hope too much, not to speak too loudly, not to want too deeply. But protection that costs you your voice is not safety, it's containment. And over time, containment becomes a cage you don't even realize you're living in. Awareness is where everything begins, and awareness doesn't require fixing or forcing anything. It simply asks you to notice. Notice when you hesitate before speaking. Notice when you apologize for taking up space. Notice when you minimize your pain or achievements. Notice how quickly you assume you're the problem. These moments are not flaws, they are clues. They point to where shame has quietly learned to live inside you. What's important here is compassion. Shame feeds on judgment, so attacking yourself for having it only strengthens its grip. The goal isn't to shame your shame. The goal is to gently bring it into the light, to say, "I see you, I know where you came from." Because shame is often born from moments where you learned that being fully yourself wasn't safe, welcomed, or rewarded. It adapted to help you survive. And while it may no longer be serving you, it once did something important. As you begin to notice these patterns, you may feel discomfort. That's normal. Awareness can feel unsettling because it interrupts autopilot. It asks you to pause instead of rushing past your feelings. It invites curiosity instead of criticism. And that pause, small as it seems, is powerful. It creates a space between what you feel and how you respond. In that space, you get a choice. You might start by naming the feeling when it appears, not analyzing it, not correcting it, just naming it. "This feels like shame," or "I'm shrinking right now." Naming takes away its invisibility. It reminds you that this is an experience you're having, not the truth of who you are. And once something is seen, it can no longer quietly run the show. With time, awareness builds a new kind of strength. Not the loud, performative kind, but the steady strength of self-recognition. You begin to realize that many of the limits you thought were fixed are actually inherited stories shaped by fear, expectations, and old wounds. And when you see that clearly, something softens inside you. You realize that what feels normal isn't always true, and what feels true isn't always permanent. This is where change begins, not with dramatic action, but with honest noticing, with the courage to look inward without turning away, with the willingness to say, maybe this voice isn't who I am. Maybe it's something I learned. And in that moment, the grip of shame loosens just enough for something else to enter: curiosity, self-trust, and the quiet possibility of living more freely. Nothing needs to be forced yet. Awareness alone is enough. For now, because when you start seeing shame instead of obeying it, you take back a piece of yourself that's been waiting patiently to be noticed. Shame has a peculiar way of creeping in when no one is watching. It thrives in silence, in the spaces where we feel most alone, and in the corners of our lives we've been trained not to examine too closely. Its quiet presence can feel like a whisper at first, a small hesitation before speaking, a fleeting doubt about whether we're enough, a twinge of guilt for wanting more than what's considered normal or safe. And the more we try to ignore it, the louder it becomes, not through noise, but through absence, the absence of permission to feel freely, to speak openly, to claim our space unapologetically. Shame is not always loud. Often it's silent, invisible, and that is what makes it so powerful. We don't recognize it for what it is because it's been hiding in plain sight, dressed as caution, humility, or prudence. It grows stronger when we believe we are alone in experiencing it. There's a secret rule that says if no one else sees it, it doesn't exist. And so we suffer quietly, carrying the belief that something is inherently wrong with us, that we are flawed, that we are too much or too little. Shame whispers, if they knew the real you, they wouldn't like you. You are not worthy. You are broken. And because these thoughts often arrive disguised as self-protection, we listen. We believe we are keeping ourselves safe by shrinking, by staying invisible, by controlling what others see and hear. We edit ourselves constantly, suppressing emotions, desires, and opinions that might feel dangerous, inappropriate, or too vulnerable to reveal. One of the most insidious parts of shame is how it teaches us to hide even from ourselves. We learn to silence our own voice, to turn away from our needs and feelings, to convince ourselves that our worth is dependent on how well we blend in, perform, or meet expectations. That internal censor becomes a constant companion, nudging us away from authenticity. It is the reason why so many people live lives that feel fine on the surface while quietly aching underneath. They have careers, relationships, and responsibilities that appear successful, but their inner world is filled with self-doubt, anxiety, and the persistent feeling that they are falling short. It is a life shaped by the fear of being seen too clearly, by the terror of being truly known. Shame loves secrecy because secrecy is its power. It survives in silence, and the more we hide, the more it takes root. Every time we hide our thoughts, apologize unnecessarily, or diminish our achievements, shame reinforces the idea that there is something unworthy in us that must be protected from the world. It teaches us to measure our value externally, to calibrate our actions and words to the expectations of others. We begin to internalize a map of acceptable behaviors, emotions, and desires, and anything outside those boundaries triggers discomfort, guilt, or self-criticism. Over time, this pattern becomes automatic. We hardly notice we are shrinking until we stop noticing ourselves entirely. The danger of silence is that it isolates us from connection, which is exactly what shame wants. Shame tells us that if anyone really knew us, our fears, our failures, our longings, they would reject us. And so instead of taking the risk to be vulnerable, we close off. We avoid intimacy. We refrain from asking for help. We downplay our achievements and hide our struggles. This isolation, even if it appears as independence on the outside, is emotionally exhausting. It keeps us small, not because we lack courage, but because we have learned to prioritize perceived safety over authentic living. At its core, shame is a social emotion. It emerges from the internalization of how we think others perceive us. It is deeply human to crave acceptance and belonging, yet shame manipulates that need, making us believe that the cost of being seen as we truly are is too high. Every whispered warning from shame is a form of control, a subtle but constant attempt to keep us safe by keeping us hidden. And when we obey these whispers, we trade freedom for the illusion of security, believing that hiding will spare us pain, judgment, or rejection. But this security is never real. It's borrowed from fear, and fear always comes at a price. Shame often presents itself as reasonableness, practicality, or realism. It convinces us that we are being cautious when we avoid risks, that we are being considerate when we stay silent, that we are being wise when we settle for less than we desire. But beneath the guise of prudence lies a message that is far less benign. You are not enough. Your needs are too much. Your voice is dangerous. And the more we accept this message as truth, the more we allow shame to dictate the boundaries of our lives, the dreams we don't pursue, the conversations we avoid, the joys we withhold, all become casualties of this quiet, persistent presence. Breaking free from shame is not about eliminating it instantly or forcefully confronting it. It's about bringing it into the light. The first step is noticing the patterns, the ways in which we shrink, hide, or silence ourselves. Awareness does not demand judgment. It does not require condemnation. It simply invites observation. For example, pause and reflect. When did I hold back today? What did I not say because I feared judgment? When did I downplay my needs or apologize for my existence? These questions, simple as they seem, begin to break the spell of secrecy that shame thrives on. Once shame is named, it loses some of its power. Naming creates space between the feeling and the self. Saying, "This is shame," or "I feel small right now," is an act of recognition. It reminds you that shame is a part of your experience, not the definition of who you are. Recognition is the beginning of choice. When you are aware of the pattern shame creates, you can decide to act differently, to speak when you would have stayed silent, to express a need when you would have hidden it, to take up space when you would have shrunk. This is not easy. It requires courage because shame thrives on familiarity, and stepping out of its influence feels unfamiliar and risky. The journey is gradual. It begins with small acts of vulnerability. Sharing a feeling with someone trustworthy, acknowledging a fear without pretending it doesn't exist, daring to ask for what you need. Each small act weakens shame's grip because shame cannot survive where honesty and connection are present. With practice, these small moments accumulate. Over time, they reshape your internal landscape. You begin to recognize that being seen, being heard, and being known are not punishable offenses. You begin to understand that your worth is not contingent on meeting invisible standards or avoiding discomfort. Compassion is a critical part of this work. Shame feeds on judgment, especially self-judgment. Attacking yourself for having shame only strengthens its influence. Instead, approach your feelings with curiosity and tenderness. Ask, why do I feel this way? Where did this voice come from? What need am I protecting by shrinking? Compassion does not excuse an action, but it softens the fear and defensiveness that shame relies on. It allows for introspection and honest reflection without the harshness that keeps us trapped in cycles of self-recrimination. Eventually, this process leads to a subtle but profound shift. You start to live with a sense of choice rather than compulsion. You begin to see that much of what you thought required obedience to protect yourself, silence, shrinking, hiding, is optional. You have the power to respond differently. You can speak, create, or ask for what you need without shame dictating the terms. And the more you practice this, the more your inner voice changes. It becomes less about caution and fear and more about encouragement, curiosity, and self-respect. In the quiet moments of reflection, you may notice a lightness emerging, a sense that the world is not as dangerous as shame made it seem, a recognition that you are allowed to exist fully, to take up space, to feel deeply, and to engage authentically. This is not an instant transformation. It is a slow, steady unraveling of the rules shame has written for your life. And with each unraveling, a new possibility arises. The possibility of living from a place of courage, connection, and worthiness rather than fear and concealment. So take the time to notice your patterns, speak the truth of your experience, share it with someone safe. Pause when shame whispers that hiding is necessary. Breathe into discomfort instead of running from it. Recognize that the moments you feel small are the moments shame is present and that you have the power to see it clearly, name it, and respond differently. Through awareness, courage, and compassion, shame's influence becomes quieter. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your life begins to feel a little freer, a little braver, and a little more whole. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is not some grand, heroic moment that changes everything at once. Courage is quieter than that. It is a choice repeated over and over to show up fully, to lean into discomfort, and to allow yourself to be seen exactly as you are, even when it feels unsafe. Many people mistake courage for confidence, for fearlessness, or for a lack of doubt. But the truth is, courage often comes precisely in the presence of fear, uncertainty, and self-doubt. It is the act of stepping forward while your heart trembles, while your mind whispers that you might fail, while shame and insecurity try to convince you that hiding is safer. Courage is showing up imperfectly, vulnerably, without guarantees, and continuing anyway. Fear is a natural companion on the path to courage. It will always be there, a reminder that stepping forward is risky. Fear manifests in many forms: the hesitation before speaking your truth, the internal debates over whether your needs are too much, the worry that someone will reject or misunderstand you, the doubt that you are capable or worthy of what you desire. And it is precisely because these fears feel so intense and real that many of us shrink back. We silence our voices. We avoid risk. We retreat into comfort, hiding parts of ourselves even from those closest to us. Fear, when left unchecked, can masquerade as wisdom, convincing us that shrinking is safety, that hiding is survival. Courage requires recognition of this fear, not its elimination. It asks you to name the discomfort, to acknowledge the trembling, to feel the tension in your chest, and then, despite it, to act anyway. Courage does not insist on certainty. It does not promise that failure will be avoided or that rejection will never occur. Instead, it is the choice to participate fully in life, even when the outcomes are unknown, even when the stakes feel high, and even when you are deeply aware of your vulnerability. It is in these moments when fear and hesitation are most present that true courage is cultivated. Vulnerability is inseparable from courage. To be courageous is to allow yourself to be vulnerable, to be seen without pretense, to express your true thoughts and feelings, and to embrace the discomfort of exposure. Many people have been conditioned to equate vulnerability with weakness, but the opposite is true. Vulnerability is the measure of strength. It is the willingness to risk emotional discomfort, to risk criticism, to risk disappointment in the pursuit of authentic connection, meaningful growth, and alignment with your truth. The path of courage is paved with vulnerability, and the more willing you are to inhabit your vulnerability, the more courage you develop. Courage often begins with small, deliberate acts. It may look like raising your hand in a meeting when you fear being judged, admitting that you need help, asking for what you want, or expressing a difficult emotion. These moments may feel insignificant at first, but each act of courage strengthens the internal muscles needed for bigger leaps. Courage is cumulative. It builds over time through repeated choices to confront discomfort rather than retreat from it. It is the quiet work of showing up over and over, even when fear whispers that you should turn away. The inner struggle courage addresses is profound. Shame often tries to convince you that you are not worthy of being heard, seen, or loved. Fear warns you that risk equals danger and that comfort equals survival. Self-doubt tells you that your voice doesn't matter or that your efforts will fail. Courage is the antidote to these internal forces. It allows you to experience fear without letting it dictate your decisions. It allows you to risk being misunderstood without hiding. It allows you to step into the world as a fully embodied, authentic version of yourself, even if the world does not respond perfectly. Courage is not about being accepted by everyone. It is about accepting yourself in spite of the possibility of rejection. The first step toward cultivating courage is noticing where you are shrinking. Pay attention to the moments when fear, shame, or self-doubt are quietly guiding your choices. Notice when you hold back, when you hesitate, when you silence your voice. These are not failings, they are signals pointing to where courage is needed. Naming these moments allows you to reclaim them. It allows you to choose differently. Instead of obeying the voice that tells you to hide, you can lean into the discomfort and act according to your values, needs, and truth. Courage also requires self-compassion. It is not a reckless, self-punishing force that demands constant performance or bravery. It is gentle. It allows mistakes, missteps, and uncertainty to exist alongside action. Courage does not eliminate fear or discomfort. It creates space to move forward in spite of them. It reminds you that your worth is not contingent on flawless performance, that taking risks does not make you reckless or inadequate, and that your voice deserves to be heard even when it trembles. Self-compassion softens the harsh internal dialogue that often accompanies acts of bravery, making courage sustainable rather than exhausting. Authentic courage transforms relationships too. When you show up as your true self without masks or pretense, you invite others to do the same. You create a space where honesty, empathy, and trust can flourish. Vulnerability and courage are contagious. They ripple outward. The courage to speak your truth encourages others to confront their fears and acknowledge their feelings. The bravery to claim your needs signals to those around you that they too are allowed to exist fully and authentically. In this way, courage is not only a personal act, it is a relational one, shaping the dynamics of the communities, friendships, and partnerships you inhabit. It is natural to struggle with the tension between courage and fear. Fear will always be present. Shame may still whisper that you are not enough or that the risk is too high. Doubt may creep in, questioning your capacity or your judgment. These feelings are not failures, they are markers of being fully alive and engaged. Courage is the deliberate act of moving forward despite these sensations. It is the practice of holding your discomfort, facing your fears, and taking intentional action that aligns with your values and authentic self. Practically, cultivating courage can begin with small daily steps. Notice one area in your life where you are shrinking. Identify a single action that aligns with your truth but feels uncomfortable. This might be sharing an honest feeling with someone you trust, asking for what you need without apology, or voicing an opinion you might normally keep to yourself. Commit to taking that action, fully aware of the fear that accompanies it. Then reflect on the experience. What did you notice? How did your body feel? What shifts occurred in your perception of yourself? These small, deliberate acts accumulate, strengthening your capacity for vulnerability and courage over time. Courage also grows through storytelling, through the act of reflecting on your experiences and articulating them to yourself or others. Telling your story, even in fragments, allows you to claim ownership over your life. It transforms shame from an invisible, controlling force into something externalized, observable, and manageable. The act of sharing, even partially, creates the possibility of connection, empathy, and understanding, which further reduces the power shame holds over your life. Ultimately, courage is about embracing the paradox of fear and action, of vulnerability and strength. It is about stepping into life fully, knowing that discomfort is inevitable, mistakes are unavoidable, and rejection is possible, but also knowing that your worth is intact regardless. Courage is not a single heroic moment, it is a continuous practice of showing up, being seen, and acting in alignment with your deepest values. It is the choice to exist authentically in a world that may not always reward authenticity, and in doing so, it transforms the way you experience yourself and the world around you. The process of cultivating courage is deeply personal, yet universally human. It requires attention, reflection, and repeated practice. It asks you to notice where you shrink, to name the fear, to lean into discomfort, and to act in alignment with what matters most. Each step, no matter how small, chips away at the quiet control shame has over your life. With time, these acts of courage build an internal landscape in which fear no longer dictates your choices, where vulnerability becomes a strength, and where you can engage fully with your own life and the lives of those around you. And so courage is not about being fearless or flawless. It is about being present, being honest, and being willing to inhabit your life fully, even when it is uncomfortable. It is about moving forward with trembling hands and a racing heart, yet stepping anyway. It is about speaking your truth, expressing your needs, and taking up space, even when the world tells you to shrink. It is a practice, a muscle, a way of living that grows stronger every time you choose action over avoidance, honesty over concealment, and presence over retreat. Courage, in its quiet, persistent, and deeply human form, is the gateway to freedom, authenticity, and meaningful connection. Change often begins with a quiet realization that much of what we have been believing about ourselves, our abilities, and our worth is not absolute truth, but a story we have been telling ourselves. For years, perhaps decades, we have internalized voices, expectations, and judgments from parents, teachers, peers, and society. These narratives, often subtle, sometimes harsh, have shaped the way we see the world and ourselves. They tell us who we should be, what we can or cannot do, what we are worthy of, and where our limits lie. And over time, without even noticing, we begin to act in accordance with these stories, believing they are facts rather than interpretations. We live constrained by scripts written long before we were capable of fully questioning them. These internalized stories often serve a purpose. They are protective. They were created to help us survive criticism, rejection, or danger. They taught us to hide our flaws, to minimize our needs, to avoid risk, and to prioritize safety over expression. In childhood, these narratives were survival mechanisms, guiding us through situations where vulnerability could have been punished or ignored. But as adults, the same narratives can become cages. They continue to influence our choices, limit our potential, and shape our self-image long after their original context has disappeared. What was once protection becomes restriction, and what was once a lesson becomes a pattern. Rewriting the inner story requires courage, awareness, and honesty. It begins with observation, noticing the beliefs that influence your behavior and recognizing how they have shaped your life. Which of your thoughts are genuinely your own and which are inherited? Which rules are helping you grow and which are keeping you small? This process is not about blaming the past or criticizing yourself for following these patterns. It is about curiosity and clarity. It is about understanding the distinction between the story you were told and the truth of who you are capable of becoming. One of the most common forms of internalized narrative is self-doubt. Self-doubt often masquerades as prudence or realism, telling you that you are not capable, that you will fail, or that you are not ready. It may have been a voice that once saved you from danger or embarrassment, but now it limits your growth. Every hesitation, every moment of silence when you could have spoken up, every opportunity passed because you feared inadequacy is evidence of a story that no longer serves you. Recognizing this is the first step toward rewriting it. You can begin by questioning the validity of these beliefs. Ask yourself, is this thought a reflection of reality, or is it a narrative I have been conditioned to accept? Is this voice helping me grow, or is it keeping me small? Shame, too, is deeply entangled in the stories we tell ourselves. Shame convinces us that we are flawed, unworthy, or dangerous simply for existing. It paints a picture of ourselves as incomplete or inferior, and then pressures us to act accordingly, to hide, to apologize, to diminish our needs, and to avoid taking up space. When we accept this story as truth, we begin to live in alignment with it, often unconsciously. We might overwork to prove our worth, people please to avoid rejection, or avoid risk to prevent embarrassment. Each action reinforces the story, making it feel more real and permanent. But the story is not immutable. It is a narrative, and narratives can be rewritten. The process of rewriting the inner story involves replacing outdated, harmful narratives with truths that align with your values, desires, and authentic self. It is not about pretending that challenges do not exist or erasing mistakes from your memory. It is about integrating experience with understanding and self-compassion. For example, instead of believing I will fail if I try, you might begin to tell yourself I am capable of learning and mistakes are part of growth. Instead of thinking I am unworthy of love unless I perform perfectly, you might replace it with I am inherently worthy, regardless of outcomes or approval. These are not empty affirmations. They are conscious, intentional reauthoring of the internal scripts that have shaped your behavior and perception for years. Reflection and mindfulness are essential tools in this process. Paying attention to your thoughts, emotions, and patterns allows you to recognize where old narratives are influencing your decisions. Journaling, meditating, or simply pausing to observe your reactions creates the space necessary to differentiate between inherited stories and authentic choices. When you catch yourself acting out of fear, guilt, or self-judgment, take a moment to ask, what story am I following right now? Does this story serve me, or does it keep me trapped? With consistent practice, this awareness strengthens, making it easier to intervene before old patterns dictate your behavior. Action is the next critical step. Awareness alone is insufficient. Change requires intentional, courageous action that aligns with the revised narrative. This might involve speaking up in situations where you previously remained silent, expressing needs you used to suppress, or pursuing goals you had abandoned due to fear. Each act of alignment between thought, feeling, and behavior reinforces the new story. Over time, these actions build a new internal framework in which shame, fear, and doubt no longer hold the same power. You begin to operate from a foundation of self-trust, clarity, and authenticity rather than limitation and constraint. Rewriting your inner story is also a deeply relational process. Often the stories we carry were reinforced by the reactions of others, family, peers, educators, or colleagues. Revising these narratives may involve setting boundaries, seeking out supportive relationships, or letting go of influences that reinforce harmful beliefs. Surrounding yourself with people who recognize and honor your authenticity strengthens the new story, providing mirrors that reflect your growth rather than old limitations. Courageous relationships provide both accountability and affirmation, helping to solidify the changes you are making internally. It is important to remember that this process is gradual. Old narratives are deeply ingrained, sometimes reinforced over decades. Change does not happen overnight. There will be moments of regression, days when old patterns resurface, and instances when fear or shame seems stronger than your will. These moments are not failures. They are reminders of the work you are doing. Each time you notice, name, and choose differently, you reinforce the new story and weaken the old one. Persistence, patience, and self-compassion are your allies in this journey. Rewriting the inner story ultimately transforms the way you experience life. Decisions that once felt heavy with obligation, fear, or self-judgment begin to feel aligned with your values and desires. You start to notice opportunities where previously you only saw risk. You find yourself speaking with honesty, acting with integrity, and responding from a place of choice rather than compulsion. The world does not become safer overnight, but your experience of it becomes richer, more expansive, and more authentic. You begin to understand that your worth is not conditional, that your voice matters, and that the life you imagined is not beyond your reach. At its core, rewriting your inner story is an act of liberation. It is the process of taking the power that shame, fear, and old beliefs have held over you and returning it to yourself. It is an invitation to see yourself clearly, to acknowledge both your vulnerabilities and your strengths, and to live in a way that reflects the truth of who you are rather than the constraints of what you were taught to believe. With each step, the invisible chains loosen, and the possibility of living fully, boldly, and authentically becomes more tangible. The process begins with noticing, continues with reflection, and is cemented through action. Awareness without action leaves the old story intact. Action without awareness can be reactive or misaligned. Together, they create the foundation for meaningful change. As you practice, you cultivate resilience, self-trust, and courage. You learn to meet fear with intentionality, shame with clarity, and doubt with inquiry. You begin to live in a story authored by you rather than dictated by past narratives or external expectations. Rewriting your inner story is not a single event, but a lifelong practice. Each day offers new opportunities to question, to choose, and to act differently. Each choice to align with authenticity strengthens the narrative of your worth, courage, and capacity. And in time, what once felt impossible or risky, expressing needs, speaking your truth, pursuing dreams, becomes natural. The inner voice that once dictated limitation becomes a tool of guidance rather than control. What was once a story of restriction transforms into a story of possibility, self-compassion, and empowerment. In this way, rewriting your inner story is not about perfection or instantaneous transformation. It is about noticing the patterns, understanding their origins, and choosing to act differently. It is about reclaiming the narrative of your life from the subtle forces that have quietly shaped it. And in doing so, you open the door to a life that is more courageous, connected, and true to who you really are. Living from a place of worthiness is not about proving yourself to anyone else. It is not about achieving milestones, accumulating accomplishments, or meeting external expectations. Worthiness is not earned through performance or validation. It is recognized, remembered, and claimed. It is the quiet, steady understanding that your life, your feelings, and your desires matter simply because you exist. Yet, for many of us, this is the hardest lesson to internalize. For years, we have been taught to measure our value by what we do, how we appear, or the ways in which we serve others. We have been taught that love, acceptance, and belonging are conditional, contingent upon success, compliance, or perfection. The result is that we live cautiously, constantly evaluating ourselves, shrinking in moments of discomfort, and allowing fear or shame to dictate how fully we inhabit our lives. To live from worthiness is to disrupt this cycle. It is to step into each day with the quiet assurance that you are enough, not because of what you accomplish or how you are seen, but simply because you are here. This recognition does not erase challenges, fear, or the temptation to doubt yourself. Those will always exist. Worthiness is not the absence of struggle. It is the willingness to inhabit your life fully despite it. It is the decision to treat yourself with the same compassion, patience, and respect that you extend to others. It is the understanding that your presence matters, that your voice matters, and that your contributions matter, even when they are small or imperfect. The inner struggle that this lesson addresses is profound. For much of our lives, we may have believed that our value is external, fragile, and dependent upon meeting certain conditions. Shame often feeds this belief, whispering that you are not enough, that your desires are too much, that your mistakes are unforgivable. Fear magnifies it, warning that asserting yourself or expressing your needs will lead to rejection or disappointment. Self-doubt reinforces it, suggesting that your accomplishments are never adequate, your voice is never worthy, and your feelings are too inconvenient or inconveniently timed. The combination of these forces can leave a person constantly second-guessing themselves, shrinking and hiding, never fully inhabiting the life they long to live. Living from worthiness begins with conscious recognition and radical honesty. You must first notice where you have been complicit in diminishing yourself, in obeying voices that tell you to hide, and allowing fear or shame to dictate your choices. You must reflect on the ways in which you have sought validation externally while neglecting the voice inside that quietly reminds you that you are enough. Awareness is the starting point, but it is only the beginning. Recognition without action is observation without transformation, too. Live from worthiness, you must begin to act in alignment with the belief that you are inherently valuable. This action can take many forms. It may begin with how you speak to yourself. Notice the internal dialogue that criticizes, judges, or diminishes you. Each time you catch yourself saying, "I'm not enough," or "I can't," pause and reframe the statement with compassion and clarity. I am learning, I am doing my best, I am allowed to exist fully. Words are powerful. They shape thought, which shapes action. By consciously choosing language that affirms your worth, you begin to create an internal environment in which courage, resilience, and growth can flourish. Another form of action is the reclamation of boundaries. Living from worthiness requires understanding that your needs, desires, and limits are valid. It is the courage to say no without guilt, to protect your energy without shame, and to assert your perspective without apology. Boundaries are not selfish. They are necessary expressions of self-respect. When you honor your boundaries, you reinforce the story of your inherent value. You send a message to yourself and others that you are worthy of consideration, care, and respect. In doing so, you begin to dismantle patterns of people-pleasing, overextension, and self-neglect that shame and fear have long reinforced. Living from worthiness also involves embracing authenticity. It requires showing up as your true self, with all your imperfections, quirks, and vulnerabilities, rather than curating a persona designed to gain approval or avoid criticism. Authenticity is uncomfortable at times because it defies the conditioned urge to conform, to hide, or to perform. Yet it is profoundly liberating. When you live authentically, you allow others to see the real you, and in doing so, you cultivate connection, trust, and meaningful relationships. You no longer rely on external validation to feel secure, because your sense of worth is anchored internally. Growth is the natural